StoryHinge, episode 75. Chris Deardorff. Business stories.
There was one thing that just kind of kept coming up over and over and over again, and it was this idea of story. That or those stories are really foundational to the effectiveness of your marketing. And so it was kind of coming to that realization where I was like, oh my gosh, like this is where we need to focus, and this is where I personally think marketing is going in terms of storytelling. And so the anchor of your business, and I said it's not only important for you to tell that story to your potential customers, your investors, your community, but you need to tell that story to yourself, to your employees, because that's really going to ground and anchor your business.
Welcome to StoryHinge. At StoryHinge, we explore foundational ideas and beliefs. We believe everyone has a beautiful story to grow. Now here's your host, Jason Vidaurri.
All right, guys, so excited today. Welcome to StoryHinge. Today we're going to be diving into the intersection of story and business. Now, we haven't touched on that much so far here in season 2, so I'm so excited today to have on Chris Deardorff. Welcome to StoryHinge.
Great to be here, Jason.
Yeah, and typically here we I like to get some background on our guests and hear a little bit about their own story before we start talking about the details of story and particularly business with you. So why don't you give us a little bit of your background and what you've been up to?
Yeah, so my I would say certainly not a very linear one. It's kind of traveled different paths, and so I'll just kind of start going back to when I came out of college. So I went to college at the University of Colorado Boulder, and it's really interesting. I grew up having parents that were very kind of math oriented. My dad was a finance guy, my mom was a math major, and I decided to become a finance major myself in college, only to find out my senior year in college that was just not what I wanted to do. And kind of the creative and artistic side of business, in other words, marketing. So went to work for GE for a few years coming out of college, kind of doing inside sales stuff, and then went back and got University of Colorado Boulder. And it was kind of at that point where I was able to reset my professional life, so to speak, and really focus where my heart was, and that was more marketing as well as entrepreneurship. And kind of came out of grad school at the absolute worst time. It was at the height of the recession in 2009, and so was fortunate enough to get a job offer right out of school by a company now known as Medtronic. And so went to work for them for a couple of years doing what they call kind of product marketing, so marketing that's focused around a product portfolio. Then went to work for a few more years for another medical device / healthcare technology company. And then my last kind of corporate stint was with a big company called Seagate Technologies. They're very well known for kind of storage technologies, and did a lot of kind of marketing and product innovation work with them. But it was kind of all along in my experience in the corporate world where, I learned a ton, I got great experience, but I always felt like it just wasn't the right fit for me. So it took me a while, but, after working in the corporate world for, almost 9-10 years, I decided to kind of listen to the entrepreneurial spirit kind of tugging at me, and made the jump to start my own marketing company. And that is the company that I now run today.
Okay. Maybe we'll jump back a little bit and then hear, we talked a little bit about, this kind of the selecting your career path, selecting what you want to do. And it sounds like you've kind of felt that out and gone different ways. Do you have a process on how you've done that, or something that maybe someone else is kind of out there saying, I'm not sure really how to find out where I want to go?
Yeah, it's such a great question. Honestly, I think it's taking dedicated and intentional time to just kind of sit back and reflect. And so, over the course of my career, I've just had moments, whether it's maybe on vacation or, a weekend away or whatever, where I just kind of try to carve out some quiet time. And, I don't do this a lot, but when I have, it's really kind of taken inventory of like, my life, my career, everything else, and really figuring out like, is this where I want to be? Is this what I want to do? And so it was kind of through that, that introspection, that I was able to, really become clear in terms of, I think one, my passion for entrepreneurship, and then two, my interest in marketing, and really, moreover, my interest in storytelling. So I didn't mention this in the intro, but I took a marketing class where I had a professor. This was in college. I took a marketing class where a professor said, at the end of the day, great marketing really is about telling compelling stories about your business, your products, your services, and that always has stuck with me. And so it was kind of, from that point on, and just through kind of my own, reflection and kind of just intentional, time to just think and process. That's where I kind of came to the realizations in terms of, what I'm really passionate about and what I'm chasing after right now is kind of this intersection between entrepreneurship and storytelling, which, today very much looks like a storytelling marketing company.
Okay. That's cool. When you're telling me about your marketing class, I also took a marketing class when I got my MBA, and
yeah,
and I come from an engineering background, and I remember that class being like the squishiest, softest class, and I didn't know where it was going. There was no equations. But if I'd had someone explain to me, hey, this is just storytelling, I think it would have resonated with me a lot more than mine did. So that's pretty cool. You had the influence back then.
Yeah. It's really interesting how you say marketing and people have, a million different perceptions. Like some people think like telemarketing, some people think commercials, print ads. But for me, it's never been any of that. It's really been kind of more this art form of how to leverage storytelling to help facilitate people make decisions, whether it's buying products, services, deciding to become a customer of whatever business. And so that's kind of the lens that I look at marketing through.
Okay. And where did your I guess desire to engage with storytelling come from, or your like of that? I mean, we all enjoy stories as humans, but where did your particular interest come
from? So a couple of spaces. One is I've always enjoyed film. Like going back to when I was just a little kid, I grew up in a single parent home, and a lot of times was, kind of had to find my own ways to entertain myself, and could always find just a great movie to, watch over and over and over. And it wasn't until I got older where I really started to, I think, understand that what I really appreciated about films was not just, it's a form of entertainment, but the elements of film, from the fact that, I think every great film starts with, like some sort of problem or some sort of hook where it immediately gets your attention, to where you have, usually some sort of compelling, relatable, interesting protagonist that ends up kind of going through some sort of transformational journey to where they're not the same character at the beginning of the story that they were, or at the end of the story that they were at the beginning, to, an ending that has some sort of, satisfying ending or positive outcome or some sort of, compelling call to action. And so, I'm kind of, I like to geek out and watch, the behind the scenes footage, the DVD extra features on movies, to kind of just see how they construct these stories and like, what's the thought process. So I find all of that just absolutely fascinating. And then I think as it pertains to business, as I kind of already mentioned, I had the influence of kind of this professor in terms of how he framed the idea of marketing. But in the last couple of years, I've started to see a trend in terms of where storytelling is becoming more embraced in the business community. A couple things I'll just point to. One is Stanford is starting their own storytelling program. I had the fortune to actually take an online course that was titled How Stories Fuel Innovation, and it was about how stories can be leveraged for both marketing as well as new product development purposes. So that was kind of one big data point. Another is there's a book out. I think it's currently in the New York Times bestsellers called Story Brand. It's by the author Donald Miller, and he's kind of created this workshop business where he teaches companies and marketers how to incorporate story into their businesses from a kind of a brand and messaging standpoint. And then just being in the entrepreneurial community, that's something I'm very active in, and you hear a lot of people talking about story and really being kind of captivated by the idea of story, but yet not really knowing what that means or how to actually, tell great stories in their business. And so all that combined has really contributed to, my interest and my passion for storytelling today.
Okay, that makes sense. No, I agree with that too. I've been, since I've been doing this podcast, I've been blown away on the power of, I guess, really mostly personal story, but story in general, and how we, I don't know if there's a more powerful teaching tool or more powerful way that we learn than from story. We seem to be able to, you can look at us from evolutionary speaking, that we're made to soak up story and to learn from it and to remember it far more than in other tactics we can try to use. In your business, I guess, did you see that through your career, the use of story, or have you seen that increase, or how has that played out through your experience?
Yeah, so the biggest thing. So when I first started my company 3 years ago, I took a very kind of corporate marketing approach to it. In fact, I think I went on some website to come up with a name, and it was like, some sort of name generator where it's like, you're like, oh, marketing and business. And it was like Market Compass. And I was like, oh, boom, that's my name. And I really kind of started with this idea like, oh, I'm just going to bring this kind of corporate approach of marketing to, the entrepreneurial space. And it worked great. And we were able to kind of build and grow our business through that way. But what was interesting is with nearly every client we were working with, there was one thing that just kind of kept coming up over and over and over again. And it was this idea of story. And clients, kept talking about, we need to tell our story. We've got to have a great story. And it was kind of from those experiences, those client interactions, where I kind of just realized, like, if we don't start with a great story, in terms of how we're marketing, companies' business, their brand, their products or services, everything else we do from a marketing standpoint is moot. It's pointless, because that or those stories are really foundational to the effectiveness of your marketing. And so it was kind of coming to that realization where I was like, oh my gosh, like this is where we need to focus, and this is where I personally think marketing is going in terms of storytelling. And so last year we actually made the intentional decision to rebrand our company to where we were going to be much more intentional about this idea of storytelling and integrating it into the marketing process and approach. And so that's kind of what we did. And so we changed our name, new logo, new brand, website, whole 9 yards. And it's been pretty cool in terms of it's not only created this, I think, unique differentiator for us as a marketing company, but it's kind of reframed the conversation that we have with our clients and prospective clients and just people in the community about marketing and how storytelling can be infused into marketing to make it much more effective.
Do you have any examples of maybe perhaps somewhere where that you see it being done really well, or maybe perhaps on the opposite side where you've seen it not being utilized as powerfully as it could be?
Yeah. So I actually just gave a talk at the Galvanize here in Boulder. The talk was titled the Power of Storytelling Marketing. And what I do typically in those talks is I present different examples, within the realm of business storytelling. One of my favorite examples that I like to use is Dollar Shave Club. I don't know if you've heard of them.
I don't think I have.
Oh, okay. So they've got this really interesting story in that they were founded, they were a startup in 2011. And they were really founded with the idea that, like, hey, the razor blade industry, particularly for men, is really filled with these overly complex razors and razor blades that cost, a lot of money for what you get. And there's really not any sort of true innovation or true kind of, great value proposition in the space. And it really hasn't evolved or changed that much in the last 20, 30 years, aside from just adding a new blade onto these.
Yeah, I was going to say, except for more blades.
Right. And so they came up with this product to basically be a simple but really effective and affordable razor blade, and that kind of became the anchor of what they were about. And they were one of the first product companies to also create this subscription model as far as, like, hey, you can save money by subscribing to get a razor every month at this price, and then you're not paying through the nose when you go to a grocery store to buy your razor from ABC razor blade brand. So the reason I use them as an example is about a year after they launched, they put together a what's called a company explainer video. And this is a video where they're just telling their story about who they are, what they do, their value proposition. And they wanted to put together this video because at the time they were trying to raise venture capital, and they knew they needed to demonstrate traction and awareness in the market to effectively raise capital. And so they created this video, but they did it in a very creative way in terms of they talked about their products, they talked about their value proposition, they talked about the problem they were solving, how their product was a great solution for that problem, and how their product as a solution made the world better. But they did it in a way that was very very irreverent. So I use them as an example because they drop the F-bomb in the first 20 seconds of their video. They bleep it out, but nonetheless they say it. And it's kind of a great storytelling tool in terms of, like, having this hook that immediately gets people's attention. And it's like, whoa, did they just drop the F-bomb? And the other thing is, basically this video is their CEO just walking through this warehouse, just doing, goofy stuff. Like he's, at one point, he's riding in the back of a wagon, just kind of talking into the camera. Another time is he cuts the tape for a box with like a giant machete, and then throws it to someone in a giant bear costume. And you're like, what is all this? But the thing is, they took kind of this formula of telling, a company story, and they kind of turn it on its side in terms of infusing it with humor, with crass, with a little bit of just kind of just random comedy. But at the same time, their message got across. And the other thing that was really kind of prevalent in the video was kind of this rebellious attitude and this kind of rebellious brand. And that's really what they were going for as a disruptor in the razor blade space, right? They were really trying to introduce innovation and kind of a new concept. And so the video just, totally, landed on the mark, and it went viral right away. And long story short, within a couple of years, they were up to over 3 million customers. And the video, I think today now has over, 25 million views on YouTube. And in 2016, they were bought by Unilever for $1 billion.
Wow.
So pretty incredible story from a company that, was a startup 5 years earlier to getting bought for $1 billion.
Yeah, that's really cool. When I started a new job about 2 years ago out here in Houston,
Yeah.
I didn't realize what I was doing, but when I first started, I started looking to try to, look at the company history and digging in there and trying to find, really what I was trying to find is the company story. What are we about? What are we here for? What's the story that connects us all? Because it's about 3,000 employees in the company, so, and we're in multiple locations. How would you, from your experience, how do you tell a story with something like that, an old company that's large? Is there a story to be found there, and how do you bring that out?
Oh yeah. I think the one of the biggest things, and I think this is where a lot of bigger established companies struggle, is like really thinking through what's the problem or the market need here. And it might be, on one hand, someone could say, well, with oil, isn't it kind of obvious? But at the same time, it's like, I think there's something to be said here beyond just, oh, we provide oil that fuels, transportation or energy or whatever. But I wonder, if you look at, just using kind of your oil example, like I wonder if a problem or a market need that is worth speaking to is, how do we provide, efficient and affordable energy for the future? And really talking to kind of that particular problem or challenge and starting there. And so the biggest thing I try to tell companies is really start with kind of what is that problem? What is that need? And then the next best thing you can do is make your customer the hero. So a lot of companies, they make the mistake of thinking we're the hero, we're here to save the day. And so their marketing ends up being kind of this, this giant selfie for their business. And it's just for a lot of customers, it's just off-putting and it's not engaging, it's not interesting. But a better way to go about it is make your customer at the center of the story you're trying to tell. Another example that I use for this is Nike. They, in the fall, the launch of the NBA season, they did this commercial, and it was all about kind of this little kid's journey of being a little kid playing basketball to growing up and playing in the NBA. And it was such a great piece of storytelling because they showed this kid kind of, go from high school to college to the NBA. And they even showed him, dealing with adversity in terms of, in college, he misses the game-winning shot, and all the fans, media are just all over him. But it also shows kind of this story of a kid growing and succeeding. And the thing was, Nike didn't make LeBron James or Kevin Durant the star of this commercial. You did see them, but they were kind of on the side, on the periphery. And it was this kid who really, is not. He's a nobody. But the fact that they kind of created this story, this piece of marketing around this relatable character who is basically like any other, kid out there playing basketball, their target audience.
Yeah.
And, the fact that they kind of built a story, they built a commercial around it and did so in a really, powerful and effective way. I think is just a great example of how you can make your customer the hero.
That's pretty cool. I guess I've missed that one, but I have to check that out because it sounds, yeah, you bet it's that full connection that the audience can put themselves in that person's place where thinking about being LeBron or these other characters it's a little more stretch for most of us. But a kid growing up and struggling and becoming more, that's all of us.
Right. Yeah. And if you take a look at kind of Nike's recent commercials and videos, they've really stepped away from the days of where Michael Jordan is kind of the center of the commercial. That's what it's all about. And now if you watch the videos, it's more just kind of focusing on everyday people, whether it's kids playing rec league soccer or doing high school track or whatever. people who are athletes, and then they might feature LeBron James or I'm trying to think who in like an Aaron Rodgers or whoever, in parts of the commercial, but they're not the center of the story. They're not the hero of the story. It's more their customer is the hero, and so I think they've just done a fantastic job of kind of making that shift in business storytelling.
You mentioned this, I think, earlier, and it's a concept on my mind. Is this the stronger shift that we want more story with the companies and this, the services and products we buy from companies? First, do you see that shift for real, or is that just my perception? And secondly, what do you think that comes from, or why do we want to have that deeper connection with those companies?
Well, I think, for me, I've always felt like we make purchasing decisions with businesses that we see as an extension of ourselves. So, for example, whether you're a PC or a Mac guy, there is a certain kind of persona that is associated with one of those brands. And typically people who kind of fall in, one of those two product camps, they identify with that persona. And that's where, I think brands really, they have to make their companies relatable. And, customers, they have to be able to see themselves using that brand, interacting with that business, buying the product. And so with that in mind, I just think that just puts, so much more importance on this idea of storytelling for businesses in terms of, gone are the days where you can just kind of have a video or ad where it just shows the product and you're done. Those days are gone. Now it's more about, okay, you need to show your customer using your product and showing how that product is bringing out some sort of positive change in their world, because that's what makes it compelling, right? Like you think of a recent Apple commercial, for example, and if they just put let's just say the Apple Watch against a black screen and we're like, oh, look at this feature, it'd be like, yeah, that's okay. But what makes Apple so effective in terms of their commercials is they show people using their products, and they show basically how those products change their lives in a positive way. And that's what's really compelling, right? As a user, like I remember when Apple, before they launched the Apple Watch, they showed this feature where a couple could send little kind of romantic messages to each other through their Apple Watches. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like that's kind of a different way that you could connect with your wife or your loved one or whoever. And that's what really kind of like, grabbed my attention, right? And so that's where, I think there absolutely has to be this shift from, what you maybe would associate with kind of traditional marketing for the last 20 years to much more of a story-driven approach.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I agree with that. So what are you doing with your company that makes it unique or different, or how are you approaching this out in the marketplace?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first and foremost, we're a marketing company. So I think a lot of companies, they hear the word storytelling and they're like, oh, what does that mean? But we're a marketing company, and we help typically small businesses and startups accelerate their growth through marketing services in the areas of market research, marketing strategy and planning, and content executions. So everything from blog writing, case studies, video, email marketing, social media, you name it. But how we try to add unique value for our clients is by integrating and emphasizing this idea of storytelling. And how we do it is kind of twofold. One is we do it at a strategic level, where we have developed a storytelling framework that we leverage to help companies tell better stories about their businesses, their products, their services. And this is really valuable in terms of kind of how companies brand and message themselves. So that's kind of the first piece. And then the second piece is from an operational standpoint, we infuse the ongoing marketing operations with this idea of storytelling. So whatever piece of marketing we're developing, whether it's a website, a blog, a social media post, an email, or even a press release, a video, we are looking at that marketing asset as a piece of story. And with that in mind, we are approaching the development of that asset like it was a story. And so, we're thinking through, okay, how can we have a great hook? How can we have a narrative arc? And who's our hero in terms of this story? How are we making the customer the hero? To how are we providing our target audience with action opportunities? Like, how are we empowering them to take action? And so all of that combined is how we incorporate the idea of storytelling in the marketing, with really the mission to help companies really drive a higher return on investment in their marketing through better engaging, influencing, and converting their target audiences.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think this is such an important place right now. I think with the changes of technology, where we're going, I think you hit this already, but I don't know if you keep surviving as a company if you're not telling your own story and telling it better and developing that over time, because otherwise we just don't feel that connection or that connection with that company and wanting to be engaged with their products or services.
Right. It's so true. Yeah, and it's really interesting. I'll have conversations with like CEOs or founders, and they just start talking about their company, and they're just rattling off the features and what the product does and da da da. And I have to stop them and just be like, I have to be honest, but like customers don't care about all of this. They don't care about all the features and the feeds and speeds and kind of whatever kind of gadget or whatever that your product does or offers. They care about how's your product going to make their life better, and that's what you have to really focus in on. And so a lot of times I will ask CEOs and I will ask founders, why did you start this company? Why did you get into this business? And they almost always tell me this compelling story of like they had this personal experience where they encountered this problem or this challenge, and they were compelled to create a solution to solve that problem or challenge. And that's where I'm like, that's your story. That's what you need to be telling to your customers, because it's relatable and it's getting at a real problem that people have, but you're also introducing a solution to that problem and an improved or a better outcome as a result of your solution. So it's just really interesting, how companies can just lose sight of it, and they just get so wrapped around the axle with the product and what it does that they forget at the end of the day, it's really just a simple matter of addressing a problem or a market need and solving it with your product.
That's cool. And as you're telling that about CEOs and founders telling that story, don't you find it often that they light up when they start telling that story about how it all started?
Big time.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like, I was talking with this founder who has started this, this healthcare software company that's helping, kind of address the continuum of care, in terms of making sure, people who, have chronic health situations have a support system, whether through family, friends, whatever. And they've created this software platform to do that. And she was telling me kind of all these different features of it. And I was just like, this is great, but why did you decide to do this? Why did you decide to start with this company? And she said, my mom, she was diagnosed with cancer, and the doctors didn't know that she didn't really have a legitimate support system in place to ensure that she took her medications, that she had was following her treatment regimen, was doing everything the doctor prescribed. The doctors just kind of assumed that, she had kind of the necessary support she needed. And this woman's mother died. And, she didn't say she died because of the situation, but she said it was kind of that experience that inspired her to create this product, this platform, to really address the problem of, people who may not have support systems in place, but then, maybe the medical community through kind of software and technology can understand that, and then look to better serve them and help them. And so, we just had this moment. I said, you have to tell that story. That is your story. That is, the kind of the anchor of your business. And I said, it's not only important for you to tell that story to your potential customers, your investors, your community, but you need to tell that story to yourself, to your employees, because that's really going to ground and anchor your business in terms of everything you do moving forward. And it was just a cool experience. She got kind of teary-eyed, and I did too. But it's just so neat when people, tell that story and realize the power in doing so.
Yeah, it's funny how we sometimes we business we forget that human side, that story's human side that's very basic to all of us, and we get caught up in the numbers and the statistics and the sales and all these other things. And so it's cool to be in that work and reach back to that. Chris, before we move on, I want to make sure people can connect with you. I don't know if we've said that yet, but how can they connect with you and your company?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, they can just go to our website, which is magicflightstudios.com, or if you just Google Magic Flight Studios, you can check us out there. We're also on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. And so, essentially same thing. If you just search for Magic Flight Studios, we'll come up. And we'd love if you like us, follow us, and connect with us.
Okay. And what would you say to someone out there, a small business out there that says, well, maybe I want to work with these guys, but I'm not there yet. Maybe what can I do on my own to start moving towards a better story?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we constantly try to, provide value, regardless if we're working with the client or not. And so I think one is, we always say, feel free to reach out to us. We offer a complimentary 30 to 60 minute, marketing session where we're happy to talk about, strategies in terms of storytelling, as well as just kind of overall marketing. So I think that's a great way. Another thing you can do is you can check out our blog. We've got a number of kind of great resources in there in terms of talking about how story can really benefit anything from market research to email marketing to community marketing, and even we have some pieces that aren't exclusively focused on story, where we just talk about best practices in terms of email today or content. And so those are kind of just two examples of some free and easy to access resources where people can get some marketing and story driven help. Okay.
Well, great. We'll make sure we put that on the podcast and on the website for people to find that link easily. Before we part, Chris, I want to make sure you have an opportunity. If we miss something here before we go, is there anything that you think we missed?
I don't think so. Maybe one other thing I'll just mention is, as people are kind of thinking about, maybe how to market their companies better, take a look, or the next time you watch a movie or a TV show, or read a good book, really pay close attention to maybe some of the elements of what makes these stories so good, in terms of was there some sort of attention grabber? Maybe it was some sort of problem or drama, or maybe interesting action sequence. And then also pay attention to kind of this idea of having kind of the central character, or having kind of a main hero, and then their arc throughout that story, in terms of how do they change from beginning to end. And then lastly, maybe kind of try and notice what made the end of this story satisfying, or how did it end in a way where you were either really content or excited or happy, or maybe you were even compelled to take some sort of action. And so those are we all watch movies, we all probably watch TV shows or read books. So in your everyday life, really kind of next time you interact with one of those mediums, take note of kind of the elements of storytelling, and then come back and think about how can I maybe incorporate some of that into my company's marketing.
No, that's real good. I'm glad you brought that up, because it's something I've been, obviously being in this podcast and digging more into story, my awareness of the stories that I consume has increased, and like that analysis that you're talking about has also increased. And I've been fascinated on how much there is to learn about that. So I appreciate that, Chris. Appreciate your time here, sharing with us on StoryHinge.
You bet. It was my pleasure.
All right. I want to thank Chris for spending time with us here on StoryHinge. Thank you all out there for being with us as well. If you want to reach out to Chris and learn about his company, you can do so at magicflightstudios.com. magicflightstudios.com. And just a few words before we part today. A couple thoughts here is that, I really enjoyed the concept of marketing is storytelling. And I mentioned that during our conversation, but I had this marketing class when I was getting my MBA, and for an engineer who's used to structure and equations and the kind of the solid process, how do you go from A to B, it was one of the squishiest classes I've ever had. It was just kind of this nebulous kind of, this is kind of what you can do, this is another idea, here's another idea. So here it explained that it's storytelling. It makes so much more sense to me now. And maybe it would have been nice to have that perspective back then, to be able to tell a good story around a product or service that you have. And I think he's right on the nose on the future of marketing, and that we're going to go more and more into this place of connecting with our companies and their products and services. And it's going to be through story, that we have a shared story, we have a common story, we have a story that we can relate to with them. I think it's where it's going to be at. So that's exciting to hear. And so if any of you small businesses out there, or large businesses for that matter, are looking for some storytelling marketing, I encourage you to check out Chris at his magicflightstudios.com. No plug there. I'm not getting any kickback for that or anything. That's just, I think there's really something in that, in being able to tell every story. And maybe I always laugh at that, because maybe I'm that, for the guy who only has a hammer, everything looks like a nail. and my tool right now is stories, so everything looks like, hey, there's an application for story here. And that may be true, but I still think there's something there. You guys, that's about all I'm going to say this week. And, hope everyone is having a great week out there. I invite you to check out the website. At the contact page, there is a place to sign up for the newsletter that is shortly going to be coming out here. And also to subscribe, share the podcast with others. We're going to keep diving into story, and all with that concept of having better stories in our lives, both crafting our own story better and also being able to understand better story and to bring them into our lives. You guys have a great week. We will catch you next week.
Thank you for sharing with us at StoryHinge. We hope this time together has added more goodness to your journey. Until next time, onward and upward, and may your own story continue to grow more beautiful.